I still remember that night, the first dinner after I came back from the hospital. The dining room felt colder than the autumn air outside. The chandelier hummed softly. The silverware clinked, and no one looked at each other. My right hand trembled as I lifted the spoon. A slight tremor I still hadn't mastered since the stroke. The spoon slipped, fell onto the porcelain plate, and the soup splattered across the white tablecloth. Tyler laughed first. That quick, sharp laugh of a man who thought he was too young to ever understand weakness. "Dad," he said, shaking his head, "you should probably learn how to retire properly." Elaine didn't even look up. "He's trying, honey," she said flatly, her tone carrying the weariness of someone long done pretending to care. Only Emily moved quietly, dabbing the spill with a napkin, whispering, "It's fine, Dad. Let me clean that." I wanted to thank her, but my throat tightened. I built this house, this table, this family, and now I was the one being tolerated in it. I smiled instead, forcing calm into the air. Because while they laughed, I was already thinking about how to make their laughter stop. The smell of roasted chicken filled the air, but I could barely taste anything. Elaine kept talking about a friend's new vacation home in Florida. Tyler bragged about his patience and the real estate investments he was considering. Emily remained silent, stirring her mashed potatoes, her eyes flickering between me and her mother. The room felt heavy, suffocating. Every sentence they spoke was a reminder that I no longer belonged to their version of life. I wasn't the provider anymore. I was the burden. When I looked at Elaine, I could still recognize the woman I once married. But beneath her perfect hair and pearl necklace, there was a stranger one who valued status over substance, appearances over loyalty. "You should be proud of Tyler," she said, sipping her wine. "He's practically running that clinic by himself. Everyone says he's going to make a name for himself." I smiled faintly. "I'm sure he will." I said, "He's learned from the best." Tyler smirked. "Maybe, but I plan to do it better." There was no malice in his tone, not yet. But it was there, an undercurrent of superiority, the kind that grows when respect dies quietly between generations. I tried to eat, but my hand shook again. The fork rattled against the plate, another tiny humiliation that no one missed. Elaine sighed audibly. "Richard, maybe it's time to let Emily help you eat," she said, almost pitying, almost cruel. "I'm fine," I replied, setting the fork down carefully. "I just need a bit of practice." Tyler chuckled. "Practice won't fix age, Dad." Emily looked up sharply. "That's enough, Tyler." "It's okay," I interrupted, before the air thickened further. "He's right after all. Age has a way of humbling us." Elaine raised an eyebrow. "You always did like your speeches, Richard. Maybe save them for someone who's listening." For a few minutes, the only sounds were the clinking of utensils and the low hum of the heater. I stared at the portrait on the wall, the one of me standing proudly in front of the old Coleman & Sons construction sign, flanked by my wife and son. That was 2015, when I was still strong, when they still looked at me with something like admiration. I wondered when exactly admiration turned into convenience, and love into endurance. After dinner, Tyler rose first, wiping his mouth with the linen napkin. "By the way, Dad," he said casually, "we should talk about the house sometime soon. You know, in case you decide to downsize." Elaine nodded as if they'd rehearsed it. "It would be easier for all of us if things were organized ahead of time." I stared at them, my smile still fixed in place. "Of course," I said, softly. "We wouldn't want things to be messy." Emily froze, sensing the shift in tone. "Maybe we can talk about that another time," she said quickly. "No need," I said. "I appreciate their concern." After they left the table, I sat alone for a long time, watching the candle burn down. The silence was thick, almost solid. I could still hear their laughter echoing faintly from the living room. I took a deep breath, feeling the tremor in my hand steady slightly. It wasn't weakness, it was restraint. When the clock struck 10, I pushed back my chair and walked slowly to my study. The air in that room was different still, safe and familiar. My desk was exactly as I left it before the stroke. The mahogany polished the papers neatly stacked, and the safe behind the painting of the harbor. I reached for the frame, swung it open, and keyed in the code I hadn't used in over a year. The safe clicked open, revealing an envelope marked in Daniel Reese's neat handwriting, "Confidential." I sat down, ran my fingers along the edge of the envelope, and exhaled slowly. Daniel. My old friend, my lawyer, the man who had stood beside me through every contract, every acquisition, every turning point. He had warned me years ago, when power fades, respect will follow. Protect yourself not with pride, but with foresight. Back then I had laughed, too sure of my place in this family to believe such words. Now they rang like prophecy. I opened the envelope. Inside were 2 documents, the original sale contract of Coleman & Sons Construction and a handwritten note from Daniel dated March 2020. Richard, one day you'll realize money isn't the inheritance worth fighting over. Respect is. If they forget that, remind them with the law, not with anger. I leaned back in my chair, staring at that line until the words blurred. Downstairs, I could still hear the TV. Elaine's voice, Tyler's laughter, the sound of a family that had already moved on from its patriarch. My jaw tightened, but I didn't feel hate. What I felt was clarity, pure and sharp. I pulled out my old notebook, the one I used to keep track of construction budgets and project notes. I turned to a blank page and wrote the date October 14th, 2023. Then beneath it, rule number 1, don't argue. Record. Rule number 2, don't react. Observe. Rule number 3, let them laugh. The law will answer for you. The tremor in my hand stopped completely as I underlined that last line. I felt steady more than I had in months. Outside, the wind brushed against the windows, making the house creak softly, as if it too remembered what it was built on. Before turning off the light, I placed the envelope back into the safe, this time locking it with deliberate slowness. I looked around the room one last time. The bookshelves, the framed blueprints, the photograph of my first construction site in 1982. Everything I built was still here, solid and silent. The only thing that had changed was who valued it. I turned toward the window. The reflection staring back at me was older, yes, but the eyes were the same steady, calculating patient. From the living room came a burst of laughter, Elaine's voice calling Tyler her future, and Tyler's confident reply. I just want what's fair. I whispered to the empty room. Fairness is coming, son. You'll just wish it hadn't. Then I switched off the light. The clock chimed once more, steady, deliberate. Outside, the lake shimmered under the moonlight. I stood there for a long while, watching the faint reflection of my house ripple on the water. For the first time since the stroke, I didn't feel small or weak. I felt like an architect again, of something much bigger than buildings. Tomorrow I would call Daniel Reese. Tonight I would sleep well. The first thing I remember after waking up was the sound of the heart monitor, that steady electronic heartbeat that didn't belong to me. The light above my bed was too bright. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and coffee, and my body felt like it had been poured full of wet cement. My right hand twitched, but it didn't obey. I turned my head slowly toward the window and saw the blurred skyline of Seattle gray and distant. I had always loved that view when I was younger, the towers I helped build standing proud against the rain. Now it felt like they belonged to someone else. Voices drifted in from the hallway. A nurse, calm and steady, said something about my recovery rate. Then came Elaine's voice, low but sharp. "Don't push him too hard," she told the doctor. "He's not the same anymore. Just do what you can." Her words stung, not because they were cruel, but because they were said so easily, as if my decline was just a matter of paperwork. The doctor answered softly, "Your husband's vitals are stable. With therapy, he'll recover partial function." There was a pause. Then Elaine's voice, again quieter, but I heard every word. "Stable or not, maybe it's better if he doesn't linger like this. He's suffered enough." I closed my eyes and pretended to be asleep. My throat ached. I could feel tears gathering in the corners of my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. A few minutes later, I heard her phone ring. "Yes, Tyler," she said. "He's awake, but it's not looking great. You should start sorting the accounts now before things get complicated." She lowered her voice, but the sound still sliced through the quiet room. "If anything happens, you'll need access to the joint account and the deed to the house. We can't wait for the courts to drag it out." My pulse quickened, setting off a steady beep from the monitor. Elaine turned toward the bed. "He's fine," she told the nurse quickly, probably dreaming. When she left, the door closed with a soft click that felt like a lock turning. Hours passed before Emily arrived. She came quietly, her hair damp from the rain, a paper cup of oatmeal in her hand. "Hi, Dad," she whispered, brushing the hair from my forehead. "You scared me." Her voice trembled slightly, but she smiled anyway. I could only nod. My throat was too dry to form words. She set the oatmeal down, pulled up a chair, and began to talk about her students, about the upcoming school play, about anything that wasn't hospitals, or wills, or death. After a while, she took a small plastic spoon, scooped up a bit of the oatmeal, and said softly, "It's your favorite. Just a bite." I opened my mouth and let her feed me like a child. I should have felt ashamed, but I didn't. I felt seen. She stayed long after visiting hours ended, reading an old newspaper aloud to me. The headline caught my attention: "Coleman and Sons Construction celebrates 25 years of excellence." The article quoted me saying something foolishly proud like, "We don't build structures, we build legacies." I almost laughed. Legacies don't crumble because of time. They crumble because of people. When she finally left, she kissed my forehead and said, "I'll come back tomorrow. Don't listen to what Mom says. She just doesn't know how to deal with this." The room fell quiet again. I stared at the ceiling and listened to the hum of the machines. Somewhere down the hall, another patient groaned softly. The smell of antiseptic hung heavy. The next morning, Tyler showed up. He looked impeccable as always, pressed shirt, expensive watch, that confident stride of a man used to being admired. He brought flowers and a thin smile. "You look better, Dad," he said, setting the flowers on the side table. We were worried. I could tell from his tone that he wasn't. "I talked to a lawyer," he continued, adjusting his cufflinks. "You know, just to make sure everything's in order. With your health, it might be good to prepare. You don't want Mom struggling if something happens." I studied his face. He didn't meet my eyes for long. "You already talked to a lawyer?" I asked, my voice rough and low. "Just preliminary stuff," he said quickly. "Standard procedure. You know how it is." I let a small smile cross my lips. "Yes, I do." He didn't stay long. He was too busy, too important to sit with his old man. When he left, he said, "Don't worry, Dad. We'll take care of everything." When the door closed, I reached under the blanket and pressed the small record button on my phone. The red light blinked twice before disappearing into standby mode. That night, the nurse dimmed the lights and left me alone. The city lights blinked faintly through the blinds, casting long bars of gold across the floor. I opened my notebook and began to write. Rule number 4. Never argue with those who think they've already won. Rule number 5. Collect evidence while they underestimate you. The tremor in my hand made the writing uneven, but I didn't care. The words mattered more than the handwriting. Around midnight, I heard a voice again. Elaine's outside in the hallway. "He's stronger than I thought," she said to someone on the phone. "The doctor says he might be home in a week or 2. But I can't keep doing this. If he goes downhill again, we'll look into long-term care. It's better that way." I wanted to laugh, but the sound wouldn't come. Long-term care. That was her polite way of saying, let someone else deal with him. When she finally left, the hallway went dark. I stared at the ceiling until my eyes ached. By the end of the week, I was walking short distances with a cane. The doctors said my recovery was impressive for my age. Elaine wasn't there to hear it. Emily was. She clapped softly proud, as if I'd climbed a mountain. On my last night in the hospital, Emily brought me my phone charger. "You'll need this," she said. "Mom probably unplugged it at home." She laughed, but her eyes were tired. "I've been thinking. Maybe you should stay with me for a while." "I'll be fine," I told her. "I still have to look after a few things." She nodded, not pressing. "Then at least promise me you'll call Daniel. He's been asking about you." I looked at her, surprised. "Daniel, yeah. He said something about unfinished business." When she left, I sat for a long time replaying those words. Unfinished business. I hadn't heard from Daniel since the day I sold the company. If he was reaching out now, it wasn't random. The next morning, the doctor came in with my discharge papers. I signed them slowly, feeling each pen stroke like a declaration of intent. Emily drove me home. She talked the whole ride, trying to keep the silence at bay. When we stopped at a red light, she glanced at me. "Dad, what are you going to do first when you get back?" I looked out the window. The city moved around us, people rushing cars, honking the same rhythm I once owned. I think I said, "I'll visit an old friend." The car turned onto Queen Anne Avenue, the skyline stretching out before us. For a moment, the morning light hit the tops of the cranes and half-built towers, and I felt something stir inside me, something like purpose. When we pulled into the driveway, Elaine's car wasn't there. The house looked pristine, untouched, as if no one had ever lived inside it. Emily helped me out of the car, carrying my bag inside. "You sure you'll be okay?" she asked. I nodded. "I've never been more sure." She hugged me tightly. "Just promise me one thing. Don't let them break you again." "I won't," I said. And for the first time in months, I meant it. After she left, I stood in the living room, breathing in the silence. The air smelled of polished wood and cold air freshener. Everything was in its place, too perfect, too still. I walked slowly to my study, each step steady, despite the faint tremor in my hand. The house creaked softly like it remembered my footsteps. I sat down at my desk, opened my notebook, and wrote one last note under yesterday's entry, rule number 6. The strongest revenge is patience. I underlined it twice. Then I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in 3 years. Daniel Reese, came the familiar voice on the other end. "Daniel," I said, my tone calm and measured. "It's Richard Coleman. I think it's time we talked." There was a pause, then the sound of a quiet laugh. "I've been waiting for that call." Outside, the wind carried the faint sound of rain against the window. I looked at my reflection in the glass, older but unbroken, and whispered to myself, "They think I'm weak. Let them. It's easier to win when no one sees you coming." The cafe by the Duwamish River hadn't changed in 20 years. The same smell of roasted beans, the same wooden counter polished by countless elbows, the same window where I used to sit with Daniel Reese when we were both still building our names. I arrived 10 minutes early, cane tapping against the floor, and asked for my usual black coffee, no sugar. Daniel was already there when I turned around, sitting in the corner booth with his briefcase on the seat beside him. His hair was silver now, but his eyes were sharp as ever. He stood when he saw me. "You look like hell," he said, smiling in that blunt, old-fashioned way only a true friend could. "And you," I replied, "look like a man who charges by the minute." We both laughed, and for the first time in months, I felt the tension in my shoulders ease. When we sat down, Daniel poured 2 coffees from the carafe the waitress left behind. "So," he said, "you called. That means you're ready to talk business or revenge. With you, they're usually the same thing." I took a sip, savoring the bitterness. "It's not revenge I want, Daniel. It's balance. That's what every man says before he hires a lawyer." He leaned back, studying me. "Elaine and Tyler." I nodded slowly. "They've been waiting for me to fall apart." "Maybe they're right to. But I'm not planning to." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "You sound better than you did a year ago." "I feel better," I said, "because now I know exactly what I need to do." He didn't interrupt. That was one thing I always liked about him. He let silence do the heavy lifting. I told him everything. The dinner, the laughter, the conversations I overheard in the hospital, the signatures. They wanted the lies about selling the house. When I finished, Daniel folded his hands and stared out the window for a long time. Finally, he said, "You've got more patience than most men I know. But patience without a plan is just waiting to die. I'm not waiting anymore." He nodded. "Good. Then let's talk strategy." He opened his briefcase and slid a stack of documents across the table. The title at the top read, "Legacy Builders Trust, Draft Version 1. I raised an eyebrow. "You were ready for this." "I'm a lawyer, Richard. I live off predicting disasters. You, my friend, are a walking case study in foresight ignored." He flipped open the first page, tapping the clause he'd highlighted in yellow. "Disrespect nullifies inheritance. It's not common, but it's legal. If we prove they've publicly humiliated or emotionally abused you, they forfeit their inheritance. But we'll need solid evidence, something recorded, witnessed, and time-stamped." I smiled faintly. "I already have that." Daniel looked up. "Of course you do. You were always one step ahead, even when pretending not to be." I reached into my coat pocket and placed a small flash drive on the table. Everything from the night of the dinner, the laughter, the words, even the tone. It's all here. He picked it up, turning it over in his hand. "You've been busy. I've been quiet," I corrected. "That's not the same thing." He slid the flash drive into his briefcase. "Then this will be the foundation. But I suggest something else. A secondary document sealed with the court triggered automatically if Elaine or Tyler try to challenge the main trust." I frowned. "A secondary document? A hidden clause," he said. "Think of it as insurance. If they decide to contest the will that the secondary trust activates, it can hold evidence, financial misconduct, secret accounts, transfers, anything we can verify now." I thought of Elaine's Florida property rumors, the constant calls she made when she thought I wasn't listening. That won't be hard to find. Daniel smiled. "You really haven't lost your edge, have you?" "I've lost a lot," I said quietly. "But not that." We sat in silence for a while, watching the rain slide down the window. The river outside was gray and restless, like the city itself. Daniel finally spoke again, softer this time. "You know this isn't just about the money. You could let it go, Richard. You could walk away." "I could," I said, "but they wouldn't learn anything. They'd just think they won." Daniel nodded. "Then you'd rather teach a lesson." "Not a lesson," I said, leaning forward. "A principle. I spent my whole life building things that lasted. Now, I'll build one more thing, a reminder that respect still has consequences." He closed the folder, sealing it with a single firm motion. "Then, Let's build it properly. We spent the next hour drafting the details. The trust would transfer ownership of my remaining assets into a managed fund, accessible only to those who fulfilled specific moral conditions. Respect, integrity, and care. Simple words but powerful when written into law. Anyone who mocked, humiliated, or exploited me would lose their claim automatically. The fund's remainder would go to charity if no heir qualified. When Daniel finished writing, he pushed the papers toward me and handed me a pen. "You sure about this? Once it's filed, there's no taking it back." I took the pen, feeling the slight tremor in my hand. "You've known me long enough to know that when my hand shakes, it's never because I'm unsure." He grinned. "That's the Richard I remember." As I signed, I could almost hear the echo of hammer strikes on concrete, the sound of building something solid again. When the ink dried, Daniel exhaled. "It's done." He placed the signed copy into his briefcase and locked it. "I'll file the paperwork by morning. You'll have the official trust within a week." I nodded. "Good. I'll start preparing the evidence archive." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "You really are treating this like a construction project." "It is one," I said. "I'm just using truth instead of steel." We both laughed quietly, the kind of laugh shared by men who've seen too much to take victory lightly. When we finished our coffee, Daniel paid the bill before I could argue. As we stood to leave, he said, "There's one more thing." "What's that?" Elaine might try to hide her tracks. "Watch for sudden financial movements. Bank transfers, real estate, anything that looks like preparation." I nodded. "I've already noticed something." Daniel looked at me curiously, but I didn't elaborate. Not yet. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets glistening like polished stone. We walked together to the parking lot, the damp air heavy with the scent of cedar and diesel. At his car, Daniel turned to me. "You know I used to worry about you. After the stroke, after the sale. I thought you'd lost the fire." I smiled. "Maybe I just learned to burn slower." He extended his hand. "Then let's make sure this ends the right way, clean, legal, and final." We shook on it. The kind of handshake that wasn't about trust anymore, but about certainty. Before he left, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and frowned. "Huh. Small world," he said. "You remember Martha Johnson? Your neighbor?" "Of course. Why?" "She just sent me an email. Apparently your wife met with a real estate agent yesterday. Florida property." I couldn't help but laugh, low and humorless. "Well, then I guess our insurance policy will have something to work with." Daniel chuckled. "You're still the same builder, Richard, always planning the foundation before the storm." "And you're still the same lawyer," I said, "charging extra for every thundercloud." He laughed, shook his head, and got into his car. As he drove off, I stood there for a long time, the damp wind tugging at my coat. The city skyline glowed faintly through the mist, those towers I had once built still standing tall. I took out my notebook and wrote one more line beneath my list of rules. Rule number 7, never destroy with anger. Rebuild with precision. Then I looked up at the faint outline of the river, steady and unhurried, and whispered to myself, "Let them keep laughing. They'll stop soon enough." When I finally walked back to my car, I felt lighter than I had in years. The plan was set. The pieces were in motion. And for the first time since my hands began to shake, I realized I was holding all the power again. The smell of roasted lamb and expensive wine filled the house that night. Elaine had spent the entire afternoon preparing for her so-called welcome home dinner. The invitations had gone out to her circle of friends, lawyers' wives, a real estate broker, and a retired surgeon who used to flirt with her at charity events. The kind of people who didn't really come to see me, but to confirm that I was still breathing. By 7, the lights were bright, the jazz playlist was humming and my dining room looked like a stage. I sat at the head of the table, a place that once meant authority, but now felt like a prop. Elaine floated around the room, greeting guests, her laughter echoing too loudly. Tyler stood near the fireplace, with a glass of bourbon, his new girlfriend Claire glued to his side. They looked perfect, young, confident, and completely unaware that arrogance has an expiration date. Dad, Tyler said, "When I entered, you looked good. Didn't expect you to make it downstairs so fast." He clapped me on the shoulder, harder than necessary. "I'm full of surprises," I said, smiling faintly. Elaine touched my arm. "Don't overexert yourself, Richard. We don't want another incident." Her friends chuckled softly, pretending not to understand. I nodded. "Don't worry. I'll try not to embarrass you." Dinner began with toasts and polished conversation. Elaine bragged about Tyler's clinic expansion, the new beach house a friend had bought, and the importance of planning for the future. I recognized every veiled jab in her words. The future she meant didn't include me. I took a slow sip of wine, watching the small red light hidden inside the flower arrangement flicker. Daniel's camera was running perfectly. 2 weeks ago, we'd installed it together, hidden among the roses. He had said, "Let them write their own confession, Richard." The first course came and went. Tyler began telling stories, each one circling back to me. "You know, my dad used to be unstoppable," he said with a grin, "but these days, we have to keep an eye on him. Last week, he almost burned toast, set off the fire alarm." Everyone laughed. I smiled too. "You always did have a talent for exaggeration," I said calmly. Elaine raised her glass. To health, to family, and to learning when to step back and let the next generation lead. They clinked glasses. I lifted mine, meeting her eyes, and to remembering who built the foundation you're standing on. The laughter faltered for a moment, then resumed a little too loud. I took another sip, steady as stone. Dinner rolled on. Claire, sweet and oblivious, tried to shift the topic. "Mr. Coleman, I've heard so much about your company. You must be proud of Tyler for following in your footsteps." I smiled. Proud, of course. Though I'm not sure he realizes how deep those footsteps go. Tyler smirked. "Oh, come on, Dad. You built houses. I rebuild people." Elaine patted his hand. "That's why he's the future Richard. Medicine innovation, not dusty old buildings." I looked around the table at their polite smiles, then said evenly, "Houses can outlast hearts, Elaine, but only if they're built with respect." A few uneasy glances passed among the guests. Elaine forced a laugh. "He always gets poetic after wine." Tyler leaned closer to Claire. "Don't mind him. He's been sentimental since retirement." I turned my gaze to my daughter at the far end of the table. Emily's eyes met mine briefly, full of quiet apology. She was the only one who saw it, the deliberate cruelty beneath the jokes, the way every word chipped away at dignities. Dessert came and went. Someone suggested a toast to second chances, and the laughter started again. Elaine placed a manicured hand on my shoulder. "You've done enough, Richard. Why don't you let me handle the finances from now on? You need rest, not responsibility." I set down my fork. "You're right," I said softly. "I think it's time I let go of a few things." Tyler smirked. "Good, we'll take care of it." I nodded slowly, hiding the spark of satisfaction that flared inside me. I'm counting on it. As the guests left later that night, Elaine walked them out with her usual grace. I stayed behind, stacking plates, ignoring the tremor in my hand. When she returned, she said, "You didn't have to clean up. I already told Tyler we'd handle it." "I know," I said. "But I like things neat. Easier to remember what belongs where." She frowned slightly, not understanding. "Well, don't stay up too late." After she disappeared upstairs, I stood in the quiet dining room. surrounded by the scent of wine and burnt candles. The little camera's red light still blinked faintly inside the flowers. I crossed the room, retrieved the memory card, and slipped it into my pocket. Upstairs, laughter echoed faintly from Tyler's room. "She'll come around," I heard him tell Elaine. "He can't hold on forever." Her voice answered calm and cold. "I know, but the sooner we get the paperwork done, the easier it'll be." I turned off the light and walked back to my study. On my desk, I opened the drawer and took out the black notebook. The page from the last entry stared back at me. Rule number 7, never destroy with anger. Rebuild with precision. I added a new line, rule number 8, record everything. Then I placed the small memory card beside the note and locked them both inside the drawer. The next morning, Emily knocked softly on the study door. "Dad." "You up, yes?" I said, closing the drawer. She stepped inside, eyes tired but gentle. "That dinner was rough. I don't know why they can't just stop." I smiled faintly. It's easier to mock what they don't understand. She hesitated, then asked quietly, "You're planning something, aren't you?" I didn't answer. She studied me for a moment, then said, "Whatever it is, I trust you." As she turned to leave, I said, "Emily." She paused at the door. "You might hear things soon. Don't believe everything they say." She nodded once. "I never do." When she was gone, I looked around the study, the photographs, the books, the faint light seeping through the curtains. Everything was still. Everything was ready. That evening, I called Daniel. "I have what we need," I said. He answered, "Good. Keep it safe. Let them keep talking. They'll hand us the rest themselves." After we hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time, listening to the ticking of the clock. The house creaked as the night wind shifted through it, carrying faint laughter from somewhere upstairs. I closed my eyes and imagined the moment that laughter would stop cleanly, legally, irreversibly. Before bed, I wrote one final note in the margin of my notebook, K1. The first confession recorded. Then I turned off the light, letting the silence settle around me like fresh concrete, solid, steady, and full of purpose. I spent the next several nights in my study long after everyone else was asleep, listening to their laughter through the walls. The camera had done its job perfectly. Every joke, every cruel remark from that dinner party now sat inside a small flash drive, no bigger than my thumb. I played the recordings one by one, the glow from my laptop lighting the room like a confession booth. Tyler's voice rang clear. He can't even hold a spoon without shaking. Elaine's followed sharp and cold. I can't keep babysitting him forever. Each time I heard their voices, I took notes, timestamps, phrases, tone. Not out of anger, but precision. Daniel had been right. Evidence spoke louder than outrage. The laughter that had once humiliated me was now an asset, a material stronger than steel. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. Daniel's name flashed across the screen. "Tell me you've started," he said without greeting. "I have everything," I replied. "Audio, video witnesses, if needed." "Good. Store them in 2 places. One for you, one for me. Encryption, password protection. I'll send you a secure transfer link by morning." His voice softened slightly. "You doing okay?" "I'm better than okay," I said. "I finally have proof. Remember, he warned, the moment you react emotionally, you lose control. Keep smiling. Keep pretending. That's my specialty now." When the call ended, I leaned back in my chair staring at the frozen frame of Elaine laughing on the screen. Her hand rested on Tyler's arm. Their smiles matched perfectly. I zoomed in and paused the image. "Smile while you can," I whispered. The law doesn't laugh. The next morning, I found Elaine in the kitchen humming as she made coffee. Tyler sat at the counter scrolling through his phone. I entered quietly, cane tapping the tile. Elaine glanced over her shoulder. "You didn't sleep again," she said. You should rest. I did, I replied, pouring myself a cup. Rest is easy when the mind's at peace. Tyler snorted. Mind at peace. You should write that down for your therapist. Elaine glared at him half-heartedly. Tyler, please. I smiled. It's fine. He's right, maybe I will. I took my coffee to the study and closed the door. Inside, I pulled out the new flash drive Daniel had mailed me, a sleek encrypted one with a steel casing, and began transferring the files. Each folder was labeled meticulously, Dinner Recording 1 Elaine Hallway, Conversation Tyler Bank Talk. The sound of the progress bar filling gave me a strange satisfaction, like watching a wall go up brick by brick. By afternoon, I'd backed up everything, twice one copy hidden in the office safe, another in a locked case labeled Construction Archives. No one ever looked at my old work. That's where secrets lived best in plain sight. Later that evening, as I passed by the living room, I heard voices again. Elaine and Tyler were sitting close together, speaking in hushed tones. He'll sign eventually, Elaine said. We just need to keep him calm. Let him think it's for convenience. Tyler replied, Once the paperwork's done, we can move the funds. The Florida property's ready. The realtor's waiting for the final transfer. My hand tightened around the cane. I stood just out of sight, the small pen recorder Daniel had sent me clipped to my pocket. Elaine's voice softened. You'll handle the bank part? Already did, Tyler said confidently. He won't even notice until it's over. I smiled faintly, pressing the recorder once one soft click. You're right, I murmured to myself. I won't notice. I'll remember. That night I listened to the recording. The sound was crisp, every word clear. Daniel would have been proud. I labeled the file House Sale Plot Wave and saved it with the rest. A few hours later, there was a knock on my study door. Dad Emily's voice was soft. Come in, I said. She stepped inside, holding a mug of tea. You've been working late every night. What are you doing? Just sorting old files, I answered without looking up. Construction files, something like that. She hesitated, glancing at the open laptop. You're recording things, aren't you? I looked at her then, meeting her eyes. Why would you think that? Because I heard Mom and Tyler talking, she said quietly. They don't hide it anymore. They think you're lost. I didn't respond. She set the mug down beside me. Whatever you're planning, Dad, be careful. You're still recovering. I'm not planning anything, I said, closing the laptop. I'm documenting. She didn't look convinced. Does Daniel know? I nodded. Emily sighed, then reached into her bag and pulled out a small USB drive. Then let me help. What's this? I copied some files from your computer, just in case something happens to this one. I sent a copy to Mr. Reese's office, too. I stared at her, a mix of surprise and pride swelling in my chest. You shouldn't have done that. I know, she said. But someone has to look out for you. When she left, I sat for a long time staring at the small drive in my hand. My daughter understood me better than I realized. She was quiet like me, patient, observant, loyal. The next day, Daniel called again. I received an anonymous package this morning, he said. Your daughter's handwriting on the note. Smart girl, I told her not to get involved. She already is. And honestly, Richard, that might be a blessing. Someone to watch your back. I didn't answer right away. Did you review the files I did? It's airtight. Between the video, the dinner audio, and now this conversation about the house, they've hung themselves. Good, I said. Then all that's left is timing. Exactly, Daniel replied. We'll need a few more days to finalize the legal seal. Until then, act natural. I always do. That evening, Tyler stormed into my study holding a stack of papers. Dad, we need your signature on these. The insurance renewal. It's just a formality. I didn't even look at the papers. Set them down. He frowned. You could at least pretend to care. Oh, I care, I said evenly. Just not in the way you think. He sighed, frustrated. You're impossible. Mom and I are trying to make sure everything's stable. You should be grateful. I am, I said, grateful that you two care so much about stability. His eyes narrowed. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing you'll understand right now. He muttered something under his breath and stormed out. As soon as the door closed, I picked up the same pen recorder and pressed it again. His entire outburst was now immortalized in digital form. Later that night, I went through the day's files, organizing them carefully. My hands were steady as I labeled each one: Tyler insurance argument, Elaine realtor conversation, family control discussion. The more I worked, the lighter I felt. Revenge didn't feel like rage anymore. It felt like architecture. Each file was a beam, each recording a support column. Together they were constructing something unshakable. When I was finished, I leaned back in the chair, closing my eyes for a moment. Outside, the house was silent. Even the laughter had stopped. Elaine must have gone to bed. Tyler was likely on a late call with his realtor, planning his next move. I opened my notebook and wrote a single sentence at the bottom of the page: blueprint completed. Construction begins soon. Then, almost as an afterthought, I added another line beneath it, rule number 9. Let them finish building their own downfall before showing them the floor plan. Before going to bed, I placed the encrypted drive into my safe and sealed it shut. The click echoed through the room like a gun being holstered. The next morning, Elaine knocked on the door, her voice falsely sweet. Richard Tyler wants to see you this afternoon. He says it's urgent. I smiled to myself. Tell him I'll be ready. She lingered at the door. You're not angry, are you? I turned in my chair, meeting her gaze. No, Elaine, I said softly. I'm patient. When she left, I opened the safe once more, just long enough to check that the drives were still there, gleaming faintly in the dim light. Then I whispered the same words Daniel had said on the phone the night before. They'll hand us the rest themselves. And in that still room, surrounded by blueprints and memories, I realized the house wasn't the only thing being sold. Soon enough, they'd sell their own integrity too, and I would be there to collect the receipt. The sky over Seattle was gray that afternoon, heavy with the kind of clouds that promised rain but never delivered. I was sitting in my study reading the same page of a book for the 5th time when the sound of a car door closing pulled me back. Through the window, I saw Tyler stepping out of his silver sedan, holding a folder in one hand and a practiced smile on his face. Elaine followed her heels, clicking sharply against the stone path. I had been expecting this visit. Daniel had called that morning to remind me, keep your calm. You'll have what you need before the day ends. The knock came precisely at 3. Come in, I said, setting the book aside. Tyler entered first, tall and brisk, followed by Elaine, who gave the room a quick glance as if checking for witnesses. Tyler smiled in a way that didn't reach his eyes. Hey, Dad. Hope we're not interrupting your nap. I returned the smile. Not at all. I was just thinking how quiet the house feels lately. Elaine sat down opposite me without waiting for an invitation. Richard, she began, we have some important paperwork for you. Just a few things to make life easier for all of us. Tyler laid the folder on my desk. It's a simple transfer, he said. Power of attorney, property management, that sort of thing. You'll still have access to everything, of course, but Mom and I can handle the day-to-day stuff. You know, take the weight off your shoulders. I looked at the folder, not touching it. You've both been very thoughtful. Come on, Dad, Tyler said, leaning on the desk. It's just practical. You can't keep up with the paperwork anymore. This way, we can make sure nothing slips through the cracks. I glanced at Elaine. You mean nothing slips through your fingers? Her expression tightened. That's not fair. Fairness, I said, folding my hands, is exactly what I'm thinking about. Tyler sighed, the exasperation breaking through his politeness. This is ridiculous. We're trying to help you. You could at least sign the damn papers. Elaine put a hand on his arm. Tyler, please. Then turning back to me, she softened her voice. Richard, you've always been so careful about the future. Let us take care of it. You deserve peace. I leaned back in my chair. You're right, I said calmly. I do deserve peace. The kind that comes from knowing everything is in its proper place. Tyler slid the folder closer. Then just sign. Right here. He tapped the page. I opened the folder, scanning the lines slowly. The language was neat, deliberate. Daniel would have recognized it instantly. One clause in particular caught my attention. Complete authorization for sale or transfer of property. They weren't even trying to hide it. I looked up, meeting my son's impatient stare. You need money, don't you? He flinched. What? The clinic, I said. You're short on funds. You thought you could use the house as collateral. Elaine's lips parted in surprise, then quickly pressed together. Tyler's jaw tightened. You have no idea what you're talking about. I have a very good idea, I said. And a very good lawyer. Elaine stood abruptly. This is getting us nowhere. You're just being stubborn, Richard. Don't make this harder than it has to be. I picked up the pen lying on my desk, twirling it between my fingers. You're right. Let's make it easy. Tyler exhaled, relieved. Finally, I bent over the paper and with slow, deliberate strokes wrote a single sentence across the signature line. I'm still alive. Then I set the pen down. Tyler blinked, confused. What the hell is that supposed to mean? It means, I said, looking him square in the eye, that as long as I'm alive, this house and everything in it belongs to me. Elaine crossed her arms. You're being impossible. No, I said softly. I'm being precise. For a moment, no one spoke. The air between us thickened. Then Tyler slammed his palm on the desk. You can't do this. We're just trying to help. Help yourselves, you mean, I said, and you've done a fine job of it so far. Elaine's face hardened. You're paranoid. This isn't healthy. I smiled faintly. Neither is betrayal, but here we are. Tyler stepped forward, pointing at me. You think you're so clever, don't you? You think you can control everything forever? But your old dad. You can't even hold a pen without shaking. I looked down at the words I'd written perfectly straight, not a tremor in sight. Seems steady enough to me. He faltered, the anger draining into something like guilt, but he masked it quickly. This conversation is over. Elaine grabbed the folder. Let's go. As they turned to leave, I said quietly, before you go, you should know something. They paused. I recorded this conversation, I said. Every word. Elaine froze. You wouldn't dare. I tilted my head. You should know by now, Elaine. I don't bluff. Tyler's face went pale. That's illegal. No, I said evenly. It's my house, and I'm perfectly within my rights to protect myself from fraud. They left without another word, the slam of the front door echoing through the house. I waited until the sound faded, then opened the drawer and removed the small recorder, its red light still glowing. I played the last few seconds back, Tyler's voice raised and sharp, followed by the heavy silence of defeat. I smiled. Perfect. That night, I sent the recording to Daniel with a short note, evidence of coercion and intent to defraud. Timestamp verified. His reply came within minutes. Got it. That's the final piece. We're ready for the reading. For the rest of the evening, I walked through the house slowly, touching the banister, the frames, the walls I'd built with my own hands decades ago. It was strange how a home could feel like both armor and prison. At 10, I poured myself a drink and sat by the window watching the city lights shimmer on the water. The house was quiet again, but it no longer felt empty. It felt balanced. Every cruel word, every laugh, every signature they'd tried to force all of it, was now part of a larger design. I thought of Tyler's face when he saw the recorder of Elaine's silence when she realized she'd gone too far. They believed they'd cornered me, that age had made me weak. But they forgot one thing: architects never stop planning. I opened my notebook and wrote, Rule number 10. When they push you to sign your downfall, sign their fate instead. Then I added another line beneath it, lie to stage initiate the reading. Before going to bed, I called Daniel once more. He picked up immediately. It's done, I said. They came, they pushed, they fell for it. Good, he said. Then we moved to the next step. I'll notify all parties. You'll receive the official invitation tomorrow morning. Make sure Elaine and Tyler both attend. Oh, they'll be there, he said. They always show up when money's involved. I chuckled. Then it'll be worth the price of admission. When I hung up, I looked out at the rain beginning to fall in soft streaks across the glass. The sound was steady, soothing, almost musical. The city glowed faintly beyond it, blurred but bright. Somewhere in the house, the clock chimed midnight. I took one last sip of whiskey and whispered into the empty room. Let them think they've won. Tomorrow they'll finally understand who they were mocking. And for the first time in years, I slept soundly. The kind of sleep that only comes to men who have already drawn the final blueprint of justice. The morning after the confrontation, Seattle felt unnaturally still. The rain had stopped, leaving the neighborhood wrapped in a thin fog that clung to every rooftop. I was pouring my first cup of coffee when a knock came at the door, soft, rhythmic, familiar. When I opened it, Martha Johnson stood there, her gray hair pulled back neatly, a small white envelope in her hand. I found this in your mailbox, she said, holding it out. No name, no return address, but something about it made me think you should see it. Her tone was careful, almost apologetic. I took the envelope, noticed the bold, unsteady handwriting on the front. Check your wife's new purchase. My pulse quickened, but I smiled politely. Thank you, Martha. You always bring interesting surprises. She frowned. Richard, this doesn't look like junk mail. You should open it. I did right there in the doorway. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Photocopies of what looked like a property agreement. The header read, Naples Realty Group, Florida. Below that, in unmistakable ink, was Elaine's signature and a transfer amount of $200,000 drawn from our joint account. Attached to it was a bank transaction slip confirming the payment. Martha's eyebrows lifted. Oh my. That's... Yes, I interrupted gently. It's exactly what I thought it was. She hesitated. Are you going to confront her? No, I said. Not yet. I folded the paper and slipped it back into the envelope. You didn't see this, Martha. She nodded slowly, but her eyes searched mine. You're not alone in this, you know. I gave a faint smile. I never am. When she left, I sat down at the kitchen table and stared at the envelope. The handwriting wasn't Elaine's or Tyler's. Someone else had sent this someone who wanted me to know. It didn't matter who. The information was what counted. I called Daniel immediately. He answered on the second ring. Talk to me. I have new evidence, I said. A property purchase in Florida. $200,000 transferred from our joint account. He whistled softly. Well, well. That's the missing puzzle piece. It's enough to prove intent. More than enough, he said. She moved funds without authorization while you were still under medical recovery. That's financial misconduct. Send me everything. I scanned the documents and emailed them to him while he was still on the line. You'll need a witness, he added. Someone who can testify she bragged about this or mentioned it publicly. Martha overheard her talking to a friend about finally buying something for herself. That should do. Perfect, Daniel said. I'll prepare her statement. Once it's filed, we can attach this evidence to the secondary trust. If Elaine contests the will, this activates automatically. So she'll lose everything the moment she tries to fight, I said. That's the idea. I hung up, exhaling slowly. I felt no joy, no triumph, just an eerie calm, like standing in the eye of a storm I had built myself. Later that afternoon, Daniel stopped by to pick up the physical documents. Martha joined us briefly in the foyer. The moment they saw each other, I recognized the flicker in their eyes. Surprise warmth, something old and unresolved. Martha Johnson, Daniel said, smiling. It's been decades. 32 years, she replied softly. Last time I saw you, you were a young lawyer arguing about zoning permits. He chuckled. And you were the nurse patching up a foreman who fell off a scaffold. For a moment, the air between them softened, and I saw in their faces what I hadn't seen in my own house for years. Familiarity without bitterness. Small world, I said, handing Daniel the sealed folder. Now about my wife's new investment. Daniel nodded, shifting back to business. I'll deliver this to the courthouse today. Once it's certified, she's trapped. Good, I said. She's always enjoyed luxury homes. Let her enjoy this one from afar. When Daniel left, Martha lingered. You're playing a dangerous game, Richard. It's not a game, I said. It's a lesson. She sighed. You've changed since your stroke. I smiled faintly. No, Martha. I just stopped pretending. That evening the phone rang. It was Elaine. Her voice was unusually calm, too calm. I hope you're happy, she said. The bank froze one of our accounts today. Care to explain? That I wouldn't know, I said. Maybe they finally realized joint doesn't mean ownership. You think this will scare me, she hissed. You can't prove anything. I don't need to prove anything, I said. You already did. She hung up. Minutes later, I heard raised voices from the living room. Elaine had come home early. Tyler was pacing near the fireplace, waving a phone in his hand. You shouldn't have moved that money, he snapped. Now the lawyer's involved and the account's under review. Elaine shot back. It's temporary. I did what needed to be done. You did what you wanted to do, Tyler shouted. Do you realize how bad this looks? If Dad finds out, he already knows, I said, stepping into the room. They both turned toward me, startled. Elaine recovered first. You went through my mail. I didn't have to, I said. Someone sent it to me. You must be more popular than you thought. Tyler glared. You can't use that against her. Oh, but I can, I said evenly. And I will. Elaine folded her arms. You think you're smarter than everyone, don't you? You always did. I took a slow step forward, my voice low and calm. No, I just learned to pay attention while everyone else was talking. For a long moment, no one spoke. The fire crackled in the hearth, throwing long shadows across the room. Then I turned and walked away, leaving them standing there in the flickering light of their own undoing. That night, Daniel called again. Everything's filed, he said. The court sealed the documents. You're untouchable now. Schedule the reading, I said. He hesitated. You sure you're ready for this? Ready? I looked around the quiet house at the fading portraits and the worn floorboards. Daniel. I've been ready for a long time. Outside, the rain started again, tapping softly against the window. I poured myself a small glass of whiskey and carried it to the porch. The air smelled of wet earth and cedar. Across the street, Martha's light was still on. She was sitting by her window reading, unaware, or maybe very aware, of the part she had played in all of this. For the first time in months, I felt something almost like peace. Not victory, not revenge, just balance. A few days later, a courier delivered 3 envelopes, one for me, one for Elaine, one for Tyler. Each contained an invitation on Daniel's letterhead. Notice of will reading, Legacy Builders Trust. Date, September 25th, 10:00 a.m. I held my envelope a moment longer than necessary before setting it on the table. The storm was coming, and this time I wouldn't be standing in the rain. I'd be holding the umbrella. That night, I opened my notebook one last time before bed and wrote Rule number 11. When the truth knocks open the door, and let it speak. The ink dried slowly on the page, curling slightly at the edges. I closed the book, blew out the lamp, and whispered into the dark, "Let the reading begin." The morning of September 25th arrived gray and cold, as if the sky itself was holding its breath. I arrived at Daniel Reese's law office an hour early, dressed in a charcoal suit that hadn't left my closet in years. My reflection in the elevator mirror looked older, but sharper, like steel that had been reforged. I carried only a leather briefcase and a calm I had earned the hard way. The receptionist greeted me politely, offering tea. I declined. My focus was absolute. Daniel was already in the conference room arranging files on the long oak table. "Everything's ready," he said, glancing up. "You okay?" "I've been ready for this since the night they laughed at me," I said. He nodded. "Then let's make this clean." 10 minutes later, Emily arrived. Her eyes were gentle but worried. "You sure you want to go through with this, Dad?" "Yes," I said simply. "It's time." By 9:45, the air shifted. The unmistakable rhythm of Elaine's heels echoed down the hallway, followed by Tyler's confident stride. They entered the room like royalty, late to their own coronation. Elaine wore a beige suit, her hair immaculate. Tyler followed, looking slightly smug, as if this was another meeting he'd already won. Richard, Elaine said coolly, "You look well. I wasn't sure you'd make it." "I rarely miss important occasions," I replied. Tyler smirked. "Let's get this over with. I've got patients waiting." Daniel gestured for everyone to sit. "This won't take long," he said evenly. "Today we're here for the official reading of the Legacy Builders Trust, executed March 2023, with amendments filed September 2024. He opened the folder and began. Clause 1. The assets of the trust include the Coleman residence, valued at $2.4 million, remaining business shares in Coleman & Sons Construction, and the joint investment portfolio totaling approximately $3.6 million. Tyler leaned back in his chair, satisfied. Elaine's lips curved faintly upward. I didn't move. Daniel continued. Clause 14. Disrespect nullifies inheritance. Elaine laughed softly. You can't be serious. That sounds like something from a fairy tale. Daniel didn't look up. The clause is legally binding, Mrs. Coleman. It states, any heir who demonstrates documented acts of humiliation, verbal abuse, or intentional harm toward the settler, Mr. Richard Coleman, shall forfeit their inheritance. Tyler rolled his eyes. You really expect a judge to believe that I don't expect anything, Daniel said. I simply present the evidence. He pressed a button on the remote control. The lights dimmed, and a video projection flickered to life on the wall. The screen showed the Coleman dining room, our dining room glowing under warm lights. Elaine's voice filled the room sharp and clear. He's trying, honey, she said, but honestly I'm tired of cleaning up after him. Then came Tyler's voice, laughing. He can't even hold a spoon without dropping it. Maybe we should get him one of those toddler bibs. The sound of laughter followed, familiar, cruel, undeniable. The room went silent, except for the soft hum of the projector. Elaine's hand trembled slightly as she reached for her glass of water. This is a violation of privacy, Tyler snapped. Daniel looked up calmly. Actually, it's evidence collected legally within Mr. Coleman's private residence. He has every right to document activity inside his home. Elaine's voice rose. You tricked us, I met her gaze. No, Elaine. I simply stopped pretending not to hear. Daniel paused the video. The date stamp confirms this recording took place during the dinner party on June 14th. Additional evidence corroborates continued verbal mistreatment following Mr. Coleman's hospitalization. Elaine's face paled. Tyler clenched his fists. Daniel turned another page. Based on these materials, Clause 14 is automatically enforced. As of today, both Elaine Coleman and Tyler Coleman are disqualified from receiving any portion of the inheritance. Elaine slammed her palm on the table. "You can't do this." I spoke softly. "You already did." Tyler stood abruptly. "This is absurd. You manipulated this whole thing. I'll challenge it in court." Daniel's voice remained steady. "You may try. But before you do, there's another document you should see." He opened a separate envelope labeled Secondary Trust Activation. This was filed automatically the moment either party attempted to contest or accuse Mr. Coleman of misconduct, Daniel said. It includes certified records from a financial investigation, specifically the unauthorized transfer of $200,000 to a Naples Realty account under Elaine Coleman's name. Elaine froze, color draining from her face. That's a misunderstanding." "It's fraud," Daniel said evenly. "A joint account withdrawal without consent. We have the signed transfer form time-stamped and verified, and Mrs. Johnson's written statement confirming you discussed the purchase in public." Tyler turned to his mother, horrified. "You said it was legal," Elaine stammered. "It was supposed to be temporary." I leaned forward. Funny. So was my patience. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Elaine's composure cracked. Her hands shook as she gripped the edge of the table. Tyler sank back in his chair, defeated. Daniel continued, his tone professional, but final. Clause 17. Remaining assets. Reallocation. All forfeited inheritance will be transferred to the Legacy Builders Fund under sole management of Miss Emily Coleman for the purpose of education and community support in the construction and engineering fields. Emily's eyes widened. "Dad?" I smiled softly. "You earned it, sweetheart. You never forgot how to respect what matters." Elaine looked at me, her voice trembling. "You're punishing us for being human." "No," I said. "I'm reminding you that being human isn't an excuse for being cruel." Tyler buried his face in his hands. "You planned this from the start, didn't you?" "Yes," I said. "The night you laughed at me for dropping my spoon." Daniel closed the folder and stood. "This concludes the reading. All documents are sealed, notarized, and final." Elaine rose from her chair, her voice hoarse. "You'll regret this, Richard." I looked her straight in the eyes. I already regretted marrying the wrong person. Everything after that was just paperwork. She stared at me for a long moment before storming out, Tyler following behind, muttering curses under his breath. The door slammed, the sound echoing down the hallway like the final clap of thunder after a storm. When the silence settled, Emily reached across the table and took my hand. "Dad," she whispered, "you didn't just win. You made them see." I squeezed her hand gently. "That was the point." Daniel exhaled slowly. "It's over, Richard. You did it." "No," I said quietly, looking toward the door they'd just walked through. "It's only over for them." Outside, the rain started again, light and steady, tapping against the office windows. I stood gathering my briefcase and turned to Daniel. "Keep every copy safe. The lesson's complete, but the evidence stays." He nodded. "Understood." As I left the building, the cool air hit my face, and I inhaled deeply. For the first time in years, I felt unburdened. Not vindictive, not triumphant, just free. Emily walked beside me, silent for a while before saying, "What now?" I looked up at the slate-colored sky and smiled faintly. Now we start rebuilding, but this time with stronger foundations. She nodded, slipping her arm through mine as we crossed the street. Behind us, the rain washed the city clean. And somewhere far above the clouds, I imagined the echo of their laughter finally dying out for good. 3 days after the will reading my name was everywhere. The Seattle Times ran a headline that read, "The Legacy Clause When Disrespect Costs Millions." Morning talk shows debated whether I had gone too far, while radio hosts argued about morality and greed. The world seemed fascinated by an old man's revenge. I watched it all unfold from my small apartment overlooking Lake Union, a mug of black coffee in my hand and the television volume turned low. They called me the architect of justice. I didn't feel like one. I just felt tired. Elaine's photo appeared on nearly every news outlet, the once elegant woman, now caught mid-glare, leaving Daniel's office, her eyes hollow and makeup smeared. Tyler, too, made his own appearance, storming past reporters outside his clinic, shouting, "No comment," as the cameras flashed. They had become what they feared most: public spectacle. Emily came by that afternoon, a grocery bag in one hand. She turned off the TV without asking. "You don't have to keep watching it," she said gently. "I know," I said. "But it's strange seeing the truth echo in other people's mouths." She unpacked the groceries, quietly filling the kitchen with the comforting sounds of normalcy. "They'll forget about it in a week," she said. "No," I replied. "The world never forgets when a rich family loses its mask." She sighed and sat across from me. "Do you think Mom will ever talk to us again?" "Maybe," I said. "But not until she runs out of people who listen to her excuses." For a while, we just sat there. The quiet felt different now, no longer suffocating, just still. Later that evening, a knock sounded on my door. When I opened it, a courier handed me an envelope stamped with a law firm's seal. Inside was a copy of a pending investigation notice, unauthorized financial transfers, potential fraud. Elaine's name was printed in bold. I stared at it for a long time before setting it on the table. Justice didn't always roar. Sometimes it arrived in quiet official language. The next day, the news anchors said Elaine Coleman was being audited for misuse of marital funds. Tyler, on the other hand, had voluntarily stepped down from his clinic to focus on family matters. The irony made me smile. That evening, Daniel called. "They're collapsing faster than I expected," he said. "Elaine's lawyer already offered a private settlement, but I declined on your behalf." "Good," I said. "Let them face what they built," he chuckled. "You know, I've seen men fight wars over less. But you did it with a notebook and a steady hand." "It's not about winning," I said quietly. "It's about remembering." After the call, I went for a walk along the waterfront. The air was crisp, the sky streaked with orange and gray. People passed by, some nodding politely, others whispering as they recognized me. A young man even stopped me once, his voice hesitant. "Mr. Coleman," he asked. "I just wanted to say, what you did took guts. My dad went through something similar, but he didn't fight back. You gave him hope." I didn't know what to say. I simply nodded, shook his hand, and kept walking. Hope, I thought. Maybe that's what this really was about. By the end of the week, public attention reached its peak. Talk shows invited psychologists, lawyers, and moral philosophers to analyze the Coleman case. Hashtags trended. Legacy clause. # respect is wealth. Some called me a hero. Others called me heartless. I stopped reading the comments after a while. The only person whose opinion still mattered was Emily's. She visited every day after work, bringing me new books, fresh coffee, and a calm I hadn't known in years. One night she found me sitting by the window, staring at the lights across the lake. "You should rest," she said. "I've had years of rest," I replied. "Now I'm finally awake." She smiled faintly. You've changed? No, I said. I just stopped pretending weakness was virtue. That weekend, a local journalist reached out requesting an interview. I almost declined, but Daniel encouraged me. Tell your version, he said, before someone else writes it for you. The interview took place in a quiet cafe downtown. The reporter, a young woman named Sarah, spoke softly and carried more empathy than most. Mr. Coleman, she began, do you feel vindicated? I considered her question carefully. No, I said. Vindication implies I was seeking revenge. I wasn't. I was seeking peace, but surely it must feel good to see them face consequences. It doesn't, I said. Nothing good comes from watching your family destroy itself. I didn't make them fall, I just stopped holding them up. She scribbled furiously in her notebook. What about forgiveness? Do you think that's possible? I looked out the window. Rain was beginning to fall again, the same soft drizzle that had followed me through this entire ordeal. Forgiveness, I said slowly, isn't about them. It's about freeing yourself from the need to be angry. I'm getting there. When the article was published 2 days later, the headline read, Richard Coleman, the man who taught America that respect is the real inheritance. It went viral overnight. Meanwhile, Elaine had gone silent. Rumors swirled that she'd sold her Florida property to pay legal fees. Tyler disappeared from public view entirely. I didn't rejoice. Every punishment was self-inflicted. They had built their downfall brick by brick. I had simply shown them the mirror. A week later, Martha came by with her usual basket of apples and a smile. They say you're a national hero now, she teased. I laughed quietly. Heroes build. I just recorded. She looked at me carefully. And what will you build now? I'm not sure yet, I admitted. Maybe something that lasts longer than pride. We sat by the window drinking tea, watching the water shimmer in the late afternoon light. For the first time, my hands didn't shake when I lifted the cup. That night, I opened my old notebook again. On the last page, I wrote a single sentence, September 30th. The storm has passed. I forgive them not for their sake, but for mine. Then, for the first time since all of this began, I closed the notebook without locking it away. 2 days later, Emily stopped by with a small box in her hands. You've been invited to speak at the university, she said. They're hosting a seminar on ethics and inheritance law. They want you to open it. I chuckled. Me? A lecture on ethics? She smiled. Who better, you lived it. I thought about it for a moment, then nodded. Maybe it's time the story stopped being about me. That evening, I walked to the window and looked out over Lake Union. The lights of the city glimmered like distant promises. I could hear faint laughter drifting from a nearby restaurant, honest, untainted laughter. I took a deep breath and whispered to the quiet room. Let them laugh. I've already built something they can't tear down. Then I turned off the light, leaving only the reflection of the city on the glass, calm, steady, and finally free. Within a week, the phrase legacy clause had taken on a life of its own. It was printed on coffee mugs, debated on podcasts, and turned into hashtags by influencers who knew nothing about me. The story had escaped the confines of our family and become something bigger, an idea people used to talk about morality, aging, and respect. I saw my name everywhere, the old man who outwitted his family, the architect of karma. Some writers called me cold. Others called me brave. I didn't feel like either. I just felt detached, watching the spectacle like an observer at his own wake. Emily brought me the morning papers every day, though I barely looked at them. She'd sit across from me at the small kitchen table and say, "They're still arguing about you, Dad." "Then I've done something useful," I'd answer. "Useful," she laughed. "You've started a national conversation." I never wanted one, I said. But sometimes conversations start themselves. One afternoon, Daniel stopped by with a thick folder under his arm. He dropped it on my desk, dust scattering across the wood. "You've done it, Richard. The university's law department is adding the Coleman case to its ethics curriculum. They're calling it the Coleman precedent." I blinked. "A precedent?" He nodded. "It'll be studied for years how intent evidence and moral conduct intertwine in inheritance law. You've turned a family tragedy into a textbook." I chuckled softly. "Then maybe some good will come of it after all." Daniel poured us both a drink. "How does it feel knowing you changed the law without setting foot in a courtroom?" "It feels," I said, raising my glass like I built something one last time. "And this time it can't be demolished." That evening, Elaine's face appeared on the evening news again. She had been photographed at a local supermarket pushing a cart alone. No makeup, no jewelry, just a tired woman in a beige coat. The anchor said she had agreed to cooperate fully with the financial inquiry. Tyler's story was even sadder. He'd issued a brief statement online, something about focusing on personal growth and leaving medicine temporarily. The comments were merciless. I turned off the TV. When Martha visited the next morning, she carried the same basket of apples she always did. "You've become quite the folk hero," she teased. "They even played your interview on NPR." I groaned. "I didn't even give an interview." "I know," she said, laughing. "They just quoted you. That line about respect being the only real inheritance, it's everywhere." She placed an apple in my hand. "You should be proud." "I'm not proud," I said. "Just relieved." She studied me for a moment. "Relieved enough to move on, maybe," I said. "If moving on means rebuilding something without bitterness." That afternoon, I received a letter from the University of Washington inviting me to speak at a symposium titled "Legacy and Respect: The Ethics of Inheritance." I almost laughed at the irony. Me a guest lecturer. Emily was thrilled. "You have to go," she said. "People need to hear this from you, not reporters." "I'm not a speaker," I said. "I'm an old man who wrote down rules so he wouldn't lose his mind." "Exactly," she replied. "And people need to hear those rules." The symposium was held 2 weeks later. The auditorium was full students, professors, journalists, and a few curious members of the public. When I walked on stage, the applause was immediate, unexpected, and a little overwhelming. I stood behind the podium, looking out over hundreds of faces. "I'm not a lawyer," I began. "I'm not even particularly wise. I'm just a man who spent his life building things. Buildings are simple, follow the blueprint, respect the materials, and they stand forever. Families, on the other hand." I paused, letting the silence stretch. Families fall apart when respect does. A few people nodded, scribbling notes. I continued, my voice steady. "We all build legacies whether we mean to or not. Mine started with steel and concrete, but it ended with silence and lessons. I didn't create the legacy clause to punish. I created it to remind. Because when people forget to honor the ones who raised them, they lose more than inheritance. They lose their foundation." The room was still. Then the applause began slow, then rising until it filled the space like a heartbeat. After the talk, students came up to thank me. Some shared their own stories, children estranged from parents, parents forgotten by children. One young man said, "You gave people like us a voice." I left the university that day feeling something I hadn't felt in years: purpose. A few days later, Emily finalized the first round of scholarships for the Legacy Builders Fund. She named the top grant the Builders Honor Award. When she showed me the list of recipients, young architects, engineers, and construction apprentices, I saw her mother's handwriting in the way she signed her letters, neat and elegant. Elaine's shadow would linger, but it no longer hurt. That evening, Daniel and Martha joined us for dinner. It was simple roast chicken, potatoes, and red wine. Daniel raised his glass. to Richard Coleman, who proved that revenge can look a lot like justice. I shook my head. To patience, I said. It's harder than revenge, but it lasts longer. We laughed, and for the first time in a long time, the laughter in my house felt clean. Later, when the guests left and Emily went home, I sat alone by the window. The lake reflected the lights of the city, calm and endless. I opened my notebook one last time and wrote October 10th. Justice isn't about balance. It's about restoration. And respect restores everything. Then I closed it and placed it back on the shelf beside the framed photo of Emily as a little girl holding a toy hammer in one hand and a crayon blueprint in the other. The next morning, as I read the newspaper, the headline caught my eye. Legacy Clause inspires nationwide discussion on moral wills. Beneath it was a quote from one of my students at the symposium. Richard Coleman didn't destroy his family. He rebuilt integrity. I smiled, folded the paper, and stepped outside into the autumn air. The trees along the lake were turning gold. For once I wasn't thinking about the past or even the future. Just the quiet now. The peace that came after everything had been set right. As I watched the sunlight ripple on the water, I thought about Daniel's words. You changed the law. Maybe I had. But more than that, I had changed myself. I whispered to the wind, let this be the legacy that lasts. Then I turned and walked back inside, ready for whatever came next. My footsteps steady, my heart lighter than it had been in years. The morning sun spilled through the wide windows of my apartment, glinting off the surface of Lake Union like broken glass. It had been almost a year since the reading of the will. The world had quieted down, the headlines had faded, and the city was moving on. I liked it that way. For the first time in decades, I woke up without urgency. I brewed my coffee slowly, watched the steam rise, and let myself enjoy the silence that used to frighten me. The phone rang just as I was sitting down. The voice on the other end was warm and familiar. Richard, it's Michael Harris. Remember me? I smiled. How could I forget? You used to triple-check every blueprint I signed off on. He laughed. Old habits die hard. Listen, I'm calling with an offer. We've rebuilt Legacy Builders Co., a new name, a clean slate. And I want you to be part of it. Not to manage, not to work, just to guide us. A symbolic role. Senior honorary advisor, if you like. I stared out the window, the city skyline shimmering in the distance. Michael, I retired a long time ago. Maybe, he said. But your name never did. I chuckled. You're still a smooth talker. Come by tomorrow, he said. I'll show you what we've built. The next morning, I found myself standing in front of a new glass-fronted office building downtown. Above the entrance, in brushed steel letters, were the words, Legacy Builders Co. The logo was simple, two interlocking pillars forming the shape of an L. Beneath it, the company's motto, Integrity Builds Forever. Michael greeted me in the lobby, all smiles and energy. He looked older too, but his eyes were still full of ambition. It's not the old Coleman and Sons, he said proudly, but it's built on the same ground, literally. We rebuilt on your old lot. He led me through the building open floors, glass walls, engineers and architects bent over digital models. It was bright, efficient, full of movement. But what caught my eye were the framed photographs on the wall of the hallway. My old construction crew, the original foundation sketches, even a newspaper clipping of me breaking ground on the first tower in 1985. You kept all this? I asked quietly. Michael smiled. You built the base we're standing on. It didn't feel right to erase that. In his office, he handed me a rolled-up blueprint. I unrolled it across his desk. It was for a skyscraper, a sleek modern structure that reached toward the sky like ambition made of glass. The title block read, Legacy Tower. Designed for tomorrow. It's our biggest project yet, he said. And we want your name on the foundation plaque. I ran my fingers across the paper. I didn't expect to leave my mark twice in one lifetime. Michael leaned back in his chair. You didn't just build buildings, Richard. You built standards. We're just trying to keep up. Before I could reply, the door opened. Emily walked in carrying a portfolio. You two started without me, she said, smiling. Michael stood quickly. Emily's been helping us coordinate the scholarship program with the company. She's incredible. She always has been, I said, pride swelling in my chest. Emily set the portfolio down. We're merging the Legacy Builders Fund with their internship program. The first group of students will start next month. Brilliant, I said softly. Bringing integrity full circle. She looked at me for a moment. You could help them, Dad. Advise. Share your experience. I laughed lightly. I'm not sure anyone needs advice from an old man with shaky hands. Michael grinned. On the contrary, you're exactly who they need. We toured the building together that afternoon. In one of the conference rooms, a group of young architects was presenting their designs for the new tower. When they saw me, they stood nervous but excited. Mr. Coleman, one of them, said, your story is why I became an engineer. The way you fought for what was right, it reminded me that design means nothing without integrity. I didn't know how to respond. I just nodded and said, then make sure your blueprints reflect that. They smiled, jotting down notes as if I'd just revealed a secret. Later, Michael took me to the rooftop. From there, the city stretched out below us, cranes, towers, and the faint shimmer of the water. Seattle looked alive again. You know, he said, people say buildings are lifeless. But they're wrong. They breathe through the people who create them, and your spirit's in every beam of this one. I looked over the edge at the foundation far below. Funny, I said. I used to think I'd never build again. Turns out I just needed better blueprints. That evening, Emily drove me home. The autumn light slanted through the car windows, painting her face gold. You looked happy today, she said. I am, I admitted. I thought my legacy was finished. But maybe legacies don't end, they evolve. She smiled. That's what the foundation's for, to keep the lessons going. At home, I found a bouquet on my doorstep, a simple arrangement of white lilies and a note attached in familiar handwriting. It was from Martha. I saw the news. Congratulations on Legacy Tower. You did it again, Richard. Proud of you. I placed the flowers on the kitchen table and smiled. Martha had become my quiet companion in this new chapter, steady kind, never intrusive. We'd spent evenings walking along the waterfront, talking about books and gardens instead of the past. It was companionship without need, peace without weight. The next morning I called her. How about dinner tonight? Only if you promise not to talk about lawyers or blueprints, she said. I'll do my best. That night we sat at a small restaurant overlooking the water. The candlelight flickered on her face as she asked, So do you finally feel at peace? I thought about it. I think so, I said. For years I built walls, houses, towers, defenses. But now I'm learning how to open doors. She smiled, raising her glass. To open doors, then. To open doors, I echoed, clinking glasses gently. After dinner, we walked by the pier. The city lights shimmered on the water, and a soft wind brushed past us. For once, I didn't feel the need to plan, or record, or prepare. I just walked, letting time move without my control. The following week, Michael invited me back to the site. The foundation of Legacy Tower was nearly complete. He handed me a small golden plaque to inspect. It read, Legacy Tower, built on respect, 2025. In honor of Richard Coleman. I ran my thumb over the engraved letters. For a moment I couldn't speak. Then I said, "It's perfect." Michael smiled. "It's yours." When the ceremony ended, I stood before the structure steel rising against the sky, cranes swinging overhead. Sunlight catching on glass. Emily stood beside me, her hand resting lightly on my arm. "It's beautiful," she said. "It's honest," I corrected. "That's what makes it beautiful." I turned to her, the sound of hammers echoing faintly in the background. "This is what legacy should look like. Not money, not property, but something that keeps others standing long after we're gone." She nodded, tears in her eyes. And as we watched the tower take shape, I realized this wasn't just my final project. It was a bridge between who I was and who I'd become, between the man who built walls and the one who learned to build hearts. That night, I wrote in my notebook for the last time, rule number 12. The truest legacy isn't what you build, it's who continues the work after you're gone. Then I closed it, placed it on the shelf beside the blueprint of Legacy Tower, and whispered to myself, "The doors are open now." The auditorium smelled faintly of polished wood and fresh flowers. Rows of chairs gleamed under the soft stage light, and a banner stretched across the back wall, Legacy Builders Fund. First annual scholarship ceremony. I stood backstage, smoothing the sleeve of my suit, listening to the gentle hum of the crowd. It had been a year since the storm that changed my life, and tonight felt like the calm that follows the kind that doesn't frighten you anymore. Emily was at the podium, her voice clear and steady. This fund was created to honor not just a builder of structures, but a builder of values. My father taught me that respect is the foundation of everything strong and lasting. The audience applauded. I could see her standing tall under the lights, confident, radiant. When she finished her speech, she looked toward the wings and smiled. And now she said, "Please welcome the man who taught me that integrity never retires, Mr. Richard Coleman." The applause rose as I stepped onto the stage. The lights were bright, but the faces were kind. I could see Martha in the front row, Daniel beside her, Michael and the young engineers behind them. Elaine and Tyler sat near the back, unexpected quiet, their presence both jarring and strangely comforting. I paused for a breath, steadying myself. "Good evening," I began. "When my daughter first told me about this event, I wasn't sure I belonged here. Builders are used to working in the background, not standing in front of crowds. But then I realized what we're celebrating tonight isn't about me. It's about what's built when you decide to choose respect over resentment." I looked out over the audience. A year ago, my family fell apart. And yes, I played my part in that. But sometimes collapse is necessary before rebuilding begins. Tonight I stand before you, not as a man who won anything, but as a man who learned something. That respect once lost can still be rebuilt if you're willing to start from the foundation. The room was silent. Even Elaine's eyes were lowered. I smiled faintly. When I was younger, I thought strength was about control. I built towers that touched the sky, but I couldn't hold a simple conversation without pride getting in the way. Now I know better. True strength isn't about holding power. It's about letting go of anger. A ripple of soft applause spread through the hall. I continued. The students who will receive these scholarships are the future of this country's architecture and engineering. But more importantly, they are the future of its character. You can build something that lasts a century, but if you build it without honesty, it will crumble from the inside. That's not just a lesson in construction, it's a lesson in life. From the back row, I caught sight of Elaine wiping her eyes. Tyler sat beside her, head bowed, hands clasped. Emily noticed them too, but didn't say anything. "The world doesn't need more architects," I said softly. "It needs more builders of trust, of compassion, of second chances." The lights dimmed slightly as the first group of scholarship recipients walked onto the stage. Young faces, nervous smiles, hopeful eyes. One of them, a tall girl with dark curls, shook my hand and whispered, "Thank you for showing that integrity still matters." I nodded. Keep building no matter what anyone tells you. When the ceremony ended, the audience rose in applause. Emily came up and hugged me, her voice trembling. "You did it, Dad. You closed the circle." Maybe I said. Or maybe I just left it open wide enough for others to walk through. Elaine approached slowly as the crowd thinned. For a long moment she didn't speak. Then quietly she said, "You were right about everything. I just didn't want to admit it." I looked at her, not the woman who'd betrayed me, but the one I'd once loved. "You didn't lose everything, Elaine," I said. "You just lost the chance to keep pretending." Her voice cracked. "I'm sorry." I know I said simply, "That's enough." Tyler stepped forward next, his expression uncertain. "Dad, I raised a hand. "Don't explain. Just live better than I did." He nodded, eyes glistening. "I will." When they left, I turned back toward the stage. The lights were dim now, the chairs half empty. Martha came to stand beside me. "You handled that beautifully," she said. "It wasn't handling," I replied. "It was closure." She smiled, linking her arm through mine. "Closure looks good on you." We stood there in silence, watching the volunteers pack up the remaining decorations. Somewhere outside the city hummed with life horns, laughter, footsteps. The same world, but it felt different now. Lighter. Later that night, I returned home to find the lake outside my window glowing with reflections of the skyline. The new tower, Legacy Tower, stood tall among them, its lights cutting through the mist. It was finished now, and on its base the plaque gleamed softly under the moonlight, built on respect. I opened my notebook one last time. The pages were nearly full. The ink faded in places. On the final page I wrote, "A year ago I thought I'd lost everything. Today I realize I only lost the noise that kept me from hearing what mattered." Legacy isn't the buildings we leave. It's the people who carry our lessons forward. I closed the book gently and set it beside the framed photograph of Emily, shaking hands with the scholarship winners. The clock ticked softly. The city outside breathed like a living thing. For the first time, I felt completely at peace. I looked at the camera resting on my desk, the one I had once used to gather evidence, and smiled. I turned it toward the window, pressed record, and said quietly, "If you've come this far with me, thank you. Maybe you've been where I was, mocked, doubted, underestimated. Don't let bitterness build your foundation. Build with patience, build with integrity, and someday, even your scars will become part of your strength." I paused, then added, "Tell me, what will you build next?" The red light blinked softly before I turned the camera off. Outside, the first snowflakes of winter drifted down, settling over the city like a quiet promise. And in that silence, I knew my story had finally found its ending, not with revenge, but with legacy.